Hello students, so for this educational tutorial we're going to talk about the stages of grief and loss, and this is based off of Kubler-Ross's research on primarily comes out of death and dying. However, it can be related to any type of loss situation, be it like a divorce or a relationship or a loss of work, loved ones. So it's not only in relation to death and dying, but this is where a lot of the research came out of. So there are 5 stages of grief that we go through, and being mindful that this can be a long drawn out process. So if we're dealing with someone that's kind of going through palliative care, like if we have a grandparent with Alzheimer's or if someone's passing away from cancer, this may not be something that happens in like 3 or 6 months. It could be a 3-year, 5-year process. And a couple of other notes about this is that not everybody goes through all 5 of these stages, and they're not all chronological. However, that being said, most of the time, denial is the first stage of the grief process. But as we go through grief, not everybody will experience denial. Some people will go straight to anger or even straight to acceptance. This is just a process that may happen as we move through the grief and loss cycle. So when we end up in a denial stage, there's a couple of things that happen here. Is that, people are trying to block out this harsh reality as a way of coping. It does give our mind and body some distance from the trauma or this news that may have befallen upon us. And it does allow us to move kind of towards the truth at a slower pace. So as we're thinking about dealing with grief, sometimes the therapy process of seeing a counselor or a therapist helps us move through the grief process. One of the worst ways to deal with grief is to avoid it completely, and that is where the denial sometimes gets us in trouble, is not accepting that this process is happening. And so this is where we can get ourselves into trouble if we are in denial of whatever grief issue is happening. Along with this, as we move through, sometimes there's anger that results, and there's frustration, and there's irritation, there's anxiety, and there are sometimes physiological symptoms that come with the grief cycle, such as fatigue or insomnia or anxiety might be experienced, like with tightness in chest or difficulty breathing. As people move through the bargaining stage where they're trying to find meaning and they're reaching out to others, and then as the process goes into depression, there may be loss of appetite, a sense of helplessness that's happening here, and feeling a bit overwhelmed as we move through. And then, the last stage that we may see is acceptance, where people start moving on and they start coming to accept that this is the end of a relationship or the end of a life or the end of a job or etc. Again, not all grief cycle is dealing with death and dying. There are many times and ways that we can experience loss and grief, and the 5 stages that we go through is kind of a common process here.